It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and this is the Bob Leonard Show. We'll be with you for about an hour, and we take the stories you've been reading about in the newspaper this week and watching on television, and we put our spin on it. We give you our impression, our interpretation of what this is all about. And like we tell you every week, it's only our opinion, and you can accept or reject it. But obviously we're going to have our say. Now last week we told you, I should mention this show will be repeated tomorrow night from 11 to 12, which is Wednesday night. And then if you miss it tonight and tomorrow night and you want to see it, it's on flinttalk.com, and it runs continuously. All you do is punch in and the dates and the times of the last, I'd say 10 programs are there. Just push the button on which one you want to see and it'll come up. So if you want to see this one, it'll be the last one on that list. But anyway, we want to talk about some interesting things tonight that, have to do with what's going on in the community in the next week or so. Last week we told you that this week we talk about the primary election to be held next Tuesday in the city of Burton. The citizens of Burton will decide which 2 of 4 candidates running for mayor will be nominated to run in the finals in November. And just as equally important is they will also decide who will be nominated to run for the 4 seats up for the vote on the Burton City Council. Like we said last week, the Burton election, like the city of Flint, which is also held Tuesday, will be the most important election in both cities since the strong mayor form of government was put in by the voters in both cities in the early 70s. Now, unlike the city of Flint, the incumbent mayor of Burton is fighting to make sure he will survive the primary to even get into the finals. Now, Burton Mayor Charles Smiley, his administration and himself have been dogged with allegations of corruption since his closest aide and friend, administrative assistant and public works director Charles Abbey, was convicted by a federal jury in federal court for bribery and extortion that involved the Pebble Creek land development in Burton. Now, this scheme caused the Smiley administration to issue a $4 million scam bond issue with the full faith and credit of the Burton taxpayers. Now, what that means is that today it would appear that the Burton taxpayers will be picking up the tab for this Smiley administration ripoff. Now, this scam permitted Smiley's good friend and traveling companion, Blake Rizzo, the land developer of the Pebble Creek subdivision, to walk off with nearly $1.5 million profit from this $4 million raised by this Smiley Pebble Creek phony bond issue. Now, according to Rizzo, and this is under oath, and we showed you this many times on this program, over the years he regularly bribed Smiley and many of Smiley's cohorts on the Burton City Council to finagle these phony money-making schemes, invariably, which are ultimately paid for by the Burton taxpayers. For the last 8 years, this program has been telling you about Blake Rizzo and the Mayor Smiley's, this unholy alliance of theirs. It wasn't until the late summer of 2003 that somebody finally heard what Lori Tennant, the councilwoman, has been complaining about for years down there. It finally caught the eye of former Genesee County prosecutor Art Bush, who began an investigation into Smiley and his friend Blake Rizzo that culminated in these allegations seeing the official light of day for the first time. And keep in mind, Tennant's been complaining about this for 10 years. Finally, someone listened to her. Now, since that time, the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice have picked up the allegations that has resulted in 2 bribery convictions of Rizzo and Abbey, with indications there are others to come. This investigation is still very much ongoing. You know, it's always interesting to note that Smiley tries to give the impression that since he's not been talked to by the FBI on this matter, he's free and clear. In fact, in the editorial in which the Journal endorsed Tennant, he told the Journal that he says law enforcement officials have never discussed the Rizzo matter with him. In other words, apparently they don't think he's done anything wrong. Let me tell you something. What is happening here? I mean, if he were just a witness, they would have called him by now because all the allegations revolve around him. You know, he says the law enforcement officials have never discussed the matter with him, clearly trying to suggest he's been cleared. You know, I hate to burst Smiley's bubble, but this fact that no one's talked to him is a very bad omen. The feds never talked to the target, the guy they zeroed in on, until they're ready to indict. The fact that the feds have not talked to Smiley means he's still a target for indictment as the investigation continues. He may have even received a target letter, which the feds sometimes send out. But the fact they haven't talked to him indicates clearly that he is a target. And this investigation is not completed, and they've zeroed in on him. You know, throughout the years, Smiley was mayor, when Smiley was mayor, and lining his and Blake Rizzo's pockets with taxpayers' dollars, he was constantly trying to create the public impression he had little to do with Rizzo. For example, in the interview with the Flint Journal, back in 2003 when they were talking about endorsement, he says to the Journal in their editorial, he denies having been in the company for many months of Blake Rizzo, developer of Maplewood Meadows on the city's south side. So he's saying, I have been with this guy when this was in October of 2003. They interviewed him on this thing. Well, what you have to understand, according to Blake Rizzo's testimony under oath, just a week before this interview with the Journal was held, Rizzo said he met with Smiley and gave him $500,000 cash. Now here's a sworn statement. This is under oath. He told this to the FBI. He told it to the prosecutor. He told it to the court when he pleaded guilty to the bribery charge. In this case, the questioning is by Mr. Bush, the prosecutor. He says, we just finished a recess and Mr. Rizzo had a chance to talk to his lawyer again. You indicated to me before we broke, and he's talking to Mr. Rizzo, that you had given cash to Mayor Smiley on a number of occasions, at least being a couple of weeks before, correct? This statement that he's talking about giving cash, was a couple of weeks before his interview. And his answer was yes. How much did you give him 2 weeks ago? Yes, $5,000. And on the other occasion, a couple hundred here and there every couple months. During the election cycle, or was this between election cycles? Well, in the last 4 years, he was in office. Okay. how much when you first, when was the first time that you gave Smiley money, cash? 10 years ago. This was going on for years and years. He's been getting what he wants by giving these bribes, and you, the taxpayers, have been paying for it. Now, with this sworn statement by Blake Rizzo, he swears that about 2 weeks before Smiley told the Journal he hadn't seen Rizzo in months, when in fact he had met with Rizzo to pick up a $5,000 cash bribe 2 weeks before. And of course they all take off on Rizzo now, saying, you know, who can believe Rizzo? Let me say something to you. Why Rizzo's statement is quite credible is the axe hanging over his head if he lies. The deal was, if he lies on any particular point, anyone, he would be charged with, at least in the state courts, 18 other felonies besides the bribery charge he pleaded guilty to. And he's been working with the feds now for 3 years on this case. And it would appear the FBI and the Justice Department have checked his story out carefully. He's probably been given a lie detector test and concluded Rizzo was telling the truth. If they didn't believe him, he would by now have been charged with the state crimes and a federal crime. Because if you lie to the FBI, you can be charged with a 4-year felony. If they're satisfied, obviously he's telling the truth. I believe the reason the feds have not charged Smiley yet, they are gathering corroborative evidence to go with Rizzo's testimony. And I believe they will eventually charge him. Even as late as 3 weeks ago, Smiley told the Journal reporter during the write-up about the 4 candidates that are running for mayor this coming Tuesday, in regard to Rizzo, it says here in the paper, it says, he had nothing to do with me. He's saying Rizzo had nothing to do with it. This is the guy Smiley traveled all over the country with on Rizzo's dime, on his credit card. They were hunting and fishing buddies. They partied together. Now we'll show you what we mean by this later in the program. During the Abbey trial, comments about the allegations against him was quite revealing. Here's the Journal story. I turns to mayor. They're talking about the case, the federal case against Abbey. Because among other things, it says that he wasn't even thinking about the election, said Smiley, who rebuffed calls for his immediate reservation. I'm just here to move this city forward, he said. Smiley's name came up often during Abbey's trial. Abbey was convicted of bribery and extortion for accepting a subdivision's lot from a developer for free or at a greatly reduced price. Smiley also was accused of bribery during the testimony in the 2-week-long trial, but he was not charged. Smiley said he's not worried about being indicted, despite the fact that developer Blake Rizzo, Abbey's accuser, told the jury that he also showered Smiley with thousands of dollars of bribes. Records produced at the trial showed Rizzo company credit card was used to pay for airplane tickets for Smiley to Florida and Las Vegas and for tickets for Abbey to Florida. Amanda Spangler, Rizzo's former secretary, told the jury she met with the mayor on a street corner with an envelope containing $300 in cash. She testified that Rizzo told her the $300 was to help bail out of jail a relative of Smiley. I mean, you know, what's that telling you here? This is the guy that's been there all these years. He's been, according to Rizzo, under oath into the FBI at the possibility of being charged with perjury if he's lying, is telling me he's been bribing Smiley for years and years, going back 10 years. You know, before this expose on this thing, the Journal had always been a big supporter of Smiley. Now, after Lori Tennant got the ear of the authorities, and it took her 10 years for them to listen, things began to go downhill for Smiley. Now, here's the Journal's first reaction. They did this in an editorial. It was right after the conviction of Abby. It says, developers deal, Burton's enrichment of Rizzo means full explanation. Among other things, it says this. It says the FBI's interest in Burton debacle involving developer Blake Rizzo appears to be the only hope for shedding light on why some of the city governments have been so eager to fatten Rizzo's wallet. Burton has its share of citizen investigators, but even the most tenacious of amateurs would find unraveling this matter out of their range. Everybody but Lori Tennant, because she's the one that unraveled this and told the FBI about it and told the prosecutor about it. So the editorial goes on to say, so leave it to the FBI to ferret out why Burton would take out a $3 million loan, actually it was $4 million, the bond issue, for placing roads, water, and sewer in Pebble Creek subdivision off East Maple Avenue, while Rizzo owned it after garnering $324,000 overhead and profit fee for the infrastructure installation. Rizzo sold the subdivision to another company without ever building it or selling lots for houses on it, including the fee with other income on the deal. Rizzo made almost $1.5 million. Meanwhile, the Public Works Director, the Burton Department of Public Works, says the city inspector, not Rizzo, actually managed most of the infrastructure work. And they gave him $325,000. Well, it becomes even more interesting. Listen to this. Part of this editorial. The official line coming from Burton is that City Attorney Richard Hamilton, who's also, I think, a target in this thing, authorized the payment to Rizzo without anyone approving, not even a nod from Mayor Smiley, so he says, who says he had nothing whatever to do with the Pebble Creek development. So much for Burton's straw mayor system, and they're being facetious now, because it's hard for anybody to believe that the biggest land development project ever in Burton, and the mayor is saying, I don't know anything about it. That's because of all this going on. He wants to stay away from it. But there's no way this thing could have happened. In fact, Rizzo testified to meeting with Smiley and Abby and others in his basement where this was discussed, on how Rizzo could make all this money and how Rizzo could pay back one of his contractors whom he owed $1 million to. And built into this $4 million bond issue was the overpayment of this contractor to pay him the $1 million Rizzo owed him. The public is paying for this. But anyway, it says the official line coming from Burton is that City Attorney Richard Hamilton authorized the payment to Rizzo without anyone's approval. If Smiley was a stranger to Rizzo, and this is what he tries to give the impression of, and we know better than that now, but if he was, even if you accept that argument, which no one can who's logical, Hamilton was not. He knew who Rizzo was. You know why he knew? Hamilton, who serves the city on contract, in other words, he's a city attorney, also has been Rizzo's attorney. Regardless of what the law experts might say regarding whether Hamilton violated any tenets of the profession, he was presumptuous, or at least very unwise, representing both Burton and Rizzo on this deal. As an example of the appearance of a conflict of interest, Hamilton was ostensibly speaking for the city, not Rizzo, when he decreed the city's deal with Rizzo to be totally appropriate. In an article on the same page, it says, Hamilton is also Rizzo's personal attorney. Shouldn't you have some arm's length negotiation when you're the city and you're paying somebody, you have a contract, you're working a contract out with somebody, and you just give them $325,000 as a fee for doing nothing, as the Public Works Director indicated? Did nothing. And incidentally, in articles, the Journal covered this thing and said this was the only time this kind of fee arrangement by the owner of a subdivision was ever made. Special for Rizzo, Smiley's friend, Abby's friend, and Hamilton's client. Here he is, the city. He's representing the city. He's giving money to his client. Now, I know the FBI has got to be looking for a kickback here. And it's interesting what Rizzo was told, the FBI, about this deal. He's told them what he did with that money and who got some of it and who didn't get some of it. So anyway, that was right after the conviction. Now, during the trial, here's Rizzo bribes brought Way to cash in. He's testifying to this at the trial. He says, a strategy to make more money on a new subdivision was what developer Blake Rizzo says he got in return for alleged bribes to Burton Public Works Director Charles Abbey. Just to make more money. That's what the deal was. Rizzo said Abbey helped him obtain more lucrative profits on the 2003 Pebble Creek subdivision deal than he would have reaped had the neighborhood been developed in a way subdivisions typically are built in Burton. That is, the other people do it. They don't pay somebody for this. He told me how to do it. And Rizzo talking about Abbey. He told me how to do it and why we were doing it, said Rizzo. Rizzo said the city gave him at least $199,000 in management fees for managing his own subdivision project. Checks totaling $324,000, including a $199,000 check, were written to Rizzo in 203 and 204 to manage the project. It was his project. Why are we paying him to manage his own project? This is according to the records obtained by the Journal. The money to pay Rizzo came from the city-issued bonds, that $4 million bonds. It's similar to a loan. We're stuck with it. The city of Burton taxpayers are. Rizzo also told the jury that Abbey instructed him which water and sewer contractors to hire for the job. These are the people that, in my opinion, showed how to inflate the charges he was making so that they were overpaid and they got that $1 million that he owed another contractor. The general contractor allegedly was owed this money, and this is the way they got it. And they built it into that $4 million bond issue. The most that bond issue should have cost, even under these circumstances, the high price of it was $2,800,000. They wanted $4 million because they had to bill that $1 million in to pay back Rizzo's contractor who he owed $1 million to, and the city of Burton administration, the Smiley administration, helped him do that. And the taxpayers are still paying for that bond issue. And then it says this, to show you how surreptitious this was. In addition, Rizzo said Abbey told him to hide himself as the true developer of Pebble Creek when it went before the city council to conceal the controversial Rizzo name from the council. The development went before the city council under another developer's name. He just wanted the heat off, Rizzo said, explaining that some council members were suspicious of his ties to the administration. Guess who that was? Lori Tennant. She had them jumping. But she was the only one on that council. She couldn't even get a second to her motions. But she continued to pursue them doggedly. And ultimately, this is the result, the exposure of this. Now, it should be noted, you know, some of these apologists, you know, they said this. They suggest that Smiley and his administration may be misjudged. Maybe just this one misstep shouldn't detract from all the other things Smiley and his friends have done on the council for the city over the years. Well, it turns out they've been taking bribes for years and years. You know, I can say without equivocation that this latest case, even if it wasn't an aberration, will still cost the taxpayers, they say, $4 million on the bond issue that only lined the pockets of Smiley's good friend Blake Rizzo. However, to show that this taking care of Smiley's political cronies is a habit and not an isolated misstep, I refer you to a couple of events that throws water on such a proposition. You know, we have the testimony of Rizzo saying that he's been paying Smiley off for at least 10 years. And now let me tell you how they work this thing and how this is not just an isolated case. Let's look at the story that appeared in the Journal in August 2002. And I go back these years because it shows how long this thing has been going on. Here we have a case where we're shown engaging in what I consider a shakedown of another potential land developer. Now, this payoff was made by this developer in the form of campaign contribution, which is quite typical of how these payoffs are made. In my opinion, the contributions were intended for a couple of councilmen to look favorably on this new developer's rezoning of his land to permit him to build condos. Now, when the vote came up to change the zoning, a heavy turnout of neighbors appeared at the council meeting and raised all kinds of hell. They opposed the rezoning. There was lots of noise. You know, the council was filled. This caused the two councilmen, Danny Wells and Bob Santelli, to chicken out and go back on their promise. And this is what Foster says. And in the paper it says this. This is what it says. Councilman Danny Wells denies the developer's claim to the Flint Journal that he met with him a year ago to discuss some projects. E. Stanley Foster, owner of Medco Incorporated in Burr Ridge, Illinois, in July threatened to sue the city over rejection of a request to rezone a parcel at the corner of Maple and Saginaw Roads for a proposed townhouse project. Foster also said he met with and contributed to the election campaigns of Wells and Councilman Santelli in 2001 and said they assured him they would support the project. Wells said Foster contributed $250 to his campaign and can have the money back if he wants it. Santelli said he met with Foster and received a contribution and made no promise and voted against Foster's project. Now, you know, what's important here is that based on these facts, it seems to me Foster's explanation seems more plausible. Otherwise, why would he give campaign contributions to people who told him they were going to oppose his project? It doesn't make sense. They told him they were going to support it. That's why he gave him the money. Why else would they give him why would he give them a campaign contribution? Now, between the promises by Santelli and Wells to Foster to support the rezoning, these guys got cold feet when it became clear voters were up in arms about the rezoning. So they ducked out on it. It's just another example that demonstrates how Smiley and his friends on the council, like Santelli and Wells, would sell out their constituents for a few pieces of silver. And it's not an unusual event. This has been going on for years. Lloyd Tennant's been saying it. Nobody's been paying attention till recently. You know, I want to go back one situation that really spells it out. I want to go back to the year 2000. And you can see the sellout happening that far back, indicating again that Pebble Creek is not an aberration, but a continuing pattern of illegality on the part of the Smiley and his administration. In this case, it was where Rizzo wanted to rezone some property. He owned to build condos. I think it was the old Howlett Farm, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. So he had to go to get the rezoning. There was a hue and cry by the residents who overflowed City Hall at the council meeting to oppose the rezoning. And despite this opposition, because the deal was fixed with his friend Rizzo, Smiley and his cronies on the council disregarded the public's opinion and approved the rezoning. Only Councilwoman Lori Tennant opposed it, claiming Rizzo bought the mayor and the majority of the council, and as turns out, she was right. You know, but in those days, in typical fashion, the Smiley team on cue at this meeting began their usual dance of trying to belittle Tennant for her opposition, which, you know, she never gave up. Most people would have. To her credit, she never gave. She kept pushing, and the result is this exposure of this corruption in city government that's costing taxpayers every day. It's costing taxpayers money. And then talk about arrogance. Immediately after the council meeting concluded, Rizzo had the gall to put on a favored person party for Smiley and his supporters from the city council for pulling this deal off despite the public opposition. Now here's the coverage by Channel 5, Jim Kurtzner. We've shown this numerous times, but it fits in better now when you see all this going on. This is Jim Kurtzner, who was this great investigative reporter here for Channel 55 and 66. He's now an investigative reporter at Channel 4 in Detroit and doing great things down there. I wish we had him here, but he's down there doing things. But anyway, here's Kurtzner description of that party. He found out about the party. We found out about the party too. And he went there and got right in their face about this. And you'll notice how shocked the people were that got caught. And you'll see the people who were caught that might surprise you and might remind you. But anyway, this is the Smiley team, some of the Smiley team, Smiley and Rizzo having this party at the Puzzler's Bar. Play that tape, will you? 2000.
Connection. This is WLEN5 News at 6.
He owns more private property than any other person in Burton, and tonight Blake Rizzo is benefiting from a controversial zoning change which barely passed a city council vote. Hello everyone, I'm Katie O'Malley.
And I'm Keith Landry. A WLEN5 investigation finds Rizzo may be too close for comfort to those who voted for his multi-million-dollar project. We'll show you the facts and let you decide. Investigative reporter Jim Kirstner joins us live from Burton City Hall with the story. Jim, what are they saying this evening?
Keith, Burton Mayor Charles Smiley says he's done nothing wrong, but he may also have a conflict of interest investigating himself. He's among a group of politicians out here we found socializing with that businessman who they just handed what critics would call a sweetheart deal, a deal opposed by many of the residents these officials represent.
I want to speak my mind.
It was standing room only last month when dozens of residents spoke out against a condominium project proposed by Blake Rizzo. It would be located on the border of Burton and Grand Blanc Township. Residents were concerned that Rizzo would be able to develop not only condominiums, but lower-cost housing, apartments, or mobile homes. Monday night, the project came up again for final passage with a zoning change that would guarantee only condominiums would be built. Still, 3 council members were opposed.
I don't feel comfortable with it, but I'll talk to some of my constituents out there because there was a lot of opposition out there.
The final vote was 4-3 with Hammond, Zelenko, Santilli, and Bonner voting yes. The mayor does not vote. Developer Rizzo left the council meeting without responding to our questions. But a short time later, about a mile down the road, we found the mayor and 3 of the favorable council members here at the Puzzlers Bar. We first recorded them all together with our hidden camera. Then Councilmember Paula Zelenko, who's running in a contested race for State House, left with her husband. And here's where it gets even more interesting. We walked into the bar with our regular camera rolling.
How are you? Good. Can I talk to you for a minute?
He's going to go.
We do?
Why is that? Are you the owner?
Yes, I am.
What's your name? May I ask your name?
Yeah, my name's Matt Lemieux.
Okay. This is Mayor Smiley.
I'm just here to find out why these guys voted for his project. Now they're here having beers.
And this is developer Blake Rizzo.
I feel fine. Okay.
We were escorted out and waited outside. The bar owner called Burton Police, who asked us to stay off the bar property and wait in the gas station next door.
If they come out, I'm going to approach them. I'm letting you know that. I mean, they're fair game. I agree with the elected officials. That's exactly right.
But those elected officials did not come out to talk with us. In fact, this is Burton Police Officer Victor Eli driving the mayor's car away. We don't know whether he was drinking, but Burton has a zero-tolerance policy for drinking and driving of city vehicles and a policy against personal use of city vehicles. We'll come back to those issues. We then saw City Councilman Ted Hammond come out to his car, and he ducked us. Can I talk to you, Mr. Hammond? Hammond is in a contested race for the Genesee County Commission. 3 people in 10 minutes drove his car to and from the bar. The first time, a local businessman. The second, Hammond himself. And the third time, the Burton City Administrator, Charles Abbey, who smiled as he drove by. The morning after, we did talk with Mayor Smiley, first about the zero-tolerance policy, and the off-duty police officer driving his car away.
Is that an ordinance? No. It's just a policy. Who enforces the policy? I enforce all policies. Okay. What if you have a conflict of interest? Good question. Good question.
The 3 council members who voted against the Rizzo project tell us they were not invited to the bar.
Everybody bought their own, period. Ask the waitress. You can try to make this look any way you want, Jim. Really, if you want my head on a platter, put it on a platter. That's fine. Don't hurt the city. If you want Ted Hammond's head on a platter, put it on a platter. That's fine. There was nothing done wrong, period. You don't think it gives the appearance of being too close or a sweetheart, do you? No, I think you can give the appearance of that. Sure, perception is reality in my business.
Now, we also called the other council members who were at the bar last night. Ted Hammond says he declined an on-camera interview, but he probably made a bad decision to go to that bar last night. He did drive his personal car, and he says he's not ashamed of his vote for the Rizzo project. The other two council members, Zelenko and Santilli, say they did nothing wrong. Now, the next Burton City Council meeting is scheduled here at Burton City Hall for August the 7th, ironically the night before the primary election. And some of the council members tell us they will be asking questions about the mayor's car and the city policy. Live in Burton, Jim Kirstner, WNEM 5 News.
You know, and then again, just this week, well, let me just read you an editorial that was in here probably in June regarding the Abbey and the activity of Smiley with Blake Rizzo. It says, this is an editorial, corrupt climate. Burton Mayor Smiley allowed atmosphere for wrongdoing. And this is the Fun Journal editors writing this. It says, even before Burton Mayor Charles Smiley's friend and aide was convicted last week of bribery and extortion, trial testimony in the mayor's own statement had shown this administration guilty of gross impropriety. Can there be any reasonable doubt that the developer Blake Rizzo, who profited immensely from the business dealing with the city, should not have bought plane tickets to Florida and Las Vegas for Smiley and Florida tickets for Public Works Director Charles Abbey? And it goes on to say, and then there is the bizarre scene described in federal court testimony of Smiley waiting on a street corner to accept an envelope of cash from Rizzo's secretary. Rizzo's secretary never should have been able to give such damning evidence because the mayor should have had the ethics and good sense not to solicit a financial favor from someone so dependent on the city's goodwill. While the aforementioned creates an undeniable era of corruption at Burton City Hall, this is the Journal saying this, Abbey's conviction and possible prison sentence stems from another transgression, his acceptance of a subdivision lot from Rizzo at for a fee or a greatly free or a greatly reduced price, allegedly for favorable city treatment. Whether or not Abbey sentencing on at that time was scheduled for June 27th, it's been adjourned twice since then. It's now set for August 14th, August 14th. Whether that ends the sordid saga, Smiley at least owes his constituents an apology for permitting a climate in which public roles and personal gain become intertwined. He starts this and begins this contrition by ending his absurd claim that, quote, he's done nothing wrong. Come on, that's pretty strong. Now, this is a newspaper that always supported Smiley, always supported him. Now, the latest ripoff of the taxpayers occurred this week when Smiley gave his comptroller, it says Mayor Charles Smiley has increased the city comptroller's salary by 41%, boasting her annual salary to $82,000 without informing the city council. Smiley blamed the council, saying Monday that the way the council approved the budget piled work upon the comptroller, forcing her to work for 60 hours a week. Wait a minute. Let me tell you what happened here. The only reason the council found out about this salary increase was that one of the so-called amateur investigators in City Hall looked at the employee pay lists and found this enormous raise and went to the city council about it. He tried to hide it, to push it through. Now what's that's going to be, the salary increase is something like, well, it goes from $58,000 $82,000. So it's about a $25,000 pay increase. Can you believe that? People are getting laid off. They don't have any money. And this woman is getting... Now keep in mind, this is one of Smiley's friends that he hired in this job while he's been mayor over the years. Now they tried to slip this through, and they got caught because of these so-called amateur investigators down there, people from the community that don't trust them and check everything. Every day they're in there checking something. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. Smiley got the Teamster unions to come in there and organize about 10 employees that were always appointees by Smiley, always appointees by every mayor until now. But because Smiley is afraid that he could lose this election, he decided to give these employees, his friends, his rubber stamps, his conspirators in many cases, protection by putting a union in there. So he brings the union in. You know, and I'm not sure that isn't an unfair labor practice. And now he begins to negotiate with the union he brought in and gives them and agrees with the union. They vote for the union because they know if he loses, these have always been appointed jobs. So the only appointed jobs left are the jobs that are specifically said to be the mayor's appointees in the charter. But these other 10 have always been appointees. So he now gets them protected by the union. And I have nothing wrong with unions protecting workers, but where it's kind of a conspiracy to defeat the purpose of the charter, which is these people have always been appointees so that if a new mayor comes in, they can make their own appointees in these jobs, which are administrative jobs, so that if they're elected to change the course of the city, the government, they do so by putting their own people in. In this case, they can't do it. The new mayor will come in and have to live with the Smiley appointees who will be totally disruptive, in my opinion. That's what they're there for. But the salary thing is interesting, too. This woman is part of that Teamsters union. They should negotiate the wages, what these people get. Because by giving this woman this wage, what are the other 9 or 10 people who are in this union and part of the Smiley group? What are they going to say? Well, we're entitled to a wage increase like that also. You give it to one union person, you got to give it to them all. Because that could be an unfair labor practice, a violation of the labor contract. So the best way to handle that, well, we'll just have to give them all a big increase, and there we go. Smiley will be giving all his people a big increase if this thing happens. And it could very well happen. And this may be all part of the game. Give one, and then you're forced to give the others. But this thing is going to come before the city council, I think, in a special meeting this week. Be interesting to see what happens. But that's what's been happening here. That's what's been happening here. Oh, this is a rip-off of the taxpayers. Now, let me get to the editorial in the Flint Journal this past Sunday. In that case, it says, this was the endorsement of Lori Tennant. And I want to read some of it to you. It says, Burton Mayor, headlines. And then it says, it's time for a change, and Tennant should be it. Now, here's how some of it reads. It's permissible for a political leader to upset constituents for a community's greater good. It's another thing to lose their trust. Unfortunately, Burton Mayor Charles Smiley is in the latter position, with many citizens who question his honesty. No kidding. Because of a developer's corruption allegations, the conviction of a Smiley aide, partly on the builder's testimony, and the mayor's poor judgment, Smiley, 53, is in an untenable position. Burton should elect a successor this year. Voters will get their first opportunity to do so on August 7th primary, when the mayor faces 3 challengers. Of them, the 4 of them, the candidate most deserving of support, indeed the only one with experience and knowledge for the job, is Councilwoman Lori Tennant. The other 2, Councilman Tina Conley, 48, who's been in office for only 2 years, and Gerald Johnson, 49, an on-call firefighter taking a break from truck driving, are not prepared. By contrast, Tennant has learned much about the city affairs in her 6 council years. The Rizzo matter suggests Tennant's long criticism of the relationship between Smiley administration and the developer has credence. Thank God the Journal has now said all this time she was complaining and they weren't listening. They now acknowledge they should have been. Her complaints have credence. All her complaints about him over the years. That's what they say. And it says, the past friendship between Rizzo and the mayor has tainted Smiley. On trips to Las Vegas, Miami, Rizzo put Smiley's ticket on his credit card. Another time he asked Rizzo for cash to help pay a woman's utility bill. Such conduct only fuels speculation that Rizzo bought favors. Smiley has not been charged with wrongdoing and says law enforcement officials have never discussed the Rizzo matter with him. Yet he acknowledged it's difficult to convince some people of his innocence. Yeah, no kidding. And then it goes on to say, this is why Burton needs a new mayor, if only to change the script. Voters should lower the curtain on this era, that is the Smiley era. And then it goes on to say, voters should, it should be done, however, by electing a replacement with a good chance to succeed. Tennant, who ran for mayor 4 years ago, is well grounded on the issues and seems capable of leading in a time of lean revenues. Once more, we feel she's focusing now on the large matters. Conley, meanwhile, is not getting comfortable in her, let me start again. Conley, meanwhile, is just getting comfortable in her council role and needs seasoning. Johnson has issues with the fire department where he wants a new police chief. In other words, that's the only real issue he has. Therefore, to put a new face in Burton's mayor's office, Tennant is the best option. In fact, the only pragmatic one. In other words, the only real one. They are. Even the Flint Journal recognizes that they were wrong on Tennant and continuing to ignore her. Now we hope the voters do the same thing. Recognize that Tennant is the one that exposes corruption. She's been at it for 10 years. Nobody just, she just pushes and pushes. As Smiley says, she pushes and pushes. That's exactly right. That's why this thing broke open. Most people would have given up. To her credit, she didn't do that. This is why the Journal has now given a ringing endorsement to her and a ringing condemnation of Smiley, because they now know what Tennant has been saying all those years was true. And to their credit, they acknowledge it. Now, keep in mind that this election there's also some important other matters that will be coming up. You'll be nominating people for 4 council seats that will be up in November also. You've got a couple of people that are really active in the community, that go to all the council meetings, very knowledgeable people. Warren Chesky is one who's running. Whenever we went to council meetings, they were there. A fellow by the name of Steve Hefner, a contractor, was always there. Never got any contracts from the city. And if he becomes a city councilman, he still wouldn't get any. But these are a couple of people. And then they have a young woman by the name of Jennifer Morkiko. And I know I'm killing that name, but she's the woman who stopped the expansion of the cement crushing business on Dort Highway. These people had the support of Smiley, and he was pushing the zoning appeals board to grant the variance so they could extend their crushing, cement crushing business, which would have imposed on the neighborhood something awful, the noise and the dust and things. She fought these people for years, and these people, Dido and Martz, who own the business, are big financial supporters of Smiley. Big supporters. She fought them. She won the battle. It was turned down. I think she would be another good choice. She obviously has shown her commitment to the city and to the people of the city. And there's a couple of people that are going to be running on there that should never be elected. Ralph Duke is one. This is one of Smiley's top aides. He and Smiley ripped off the city taxpayers on his pension when he left. They gave him a $400 increase every month on his pension he didn't deserve. Completely didn't deserve, and he got it. And we're paying them. I should say, you, the taxpayers, are paying it. And then you had a situation where he used a city vendor's card to go out and buy all kinds of lighting for his own home. Put it in his own home when he was asked to pay it, he refused. It took a letter from somebody inside to the news media bringing this up, that he's refused to pay it, that he ultimately paid it. This guy is your city councilman. He's running again. Then you have a guy by the name of Gary Isham that's on there that really is a big Smiley. He was a guy that said he wasn't a Smiley guy when he ran, but when he got in, he took and changed his vote and voted with the Smiley people to take all the people who were elected to clean up the city out of the committee chairmanships and gave it to all Smiley people. He double-crossed the people, and I think he should be gone too. But those are 2 people running. There's 3 people we mentioned that we think are pretty good. You're going to make your own choice. So you're going to nominate 8 people because there's 4 seats, and in November you'll be electing 4 people. But I hope these 3 people that I mentioned to you get in, because they don't seem to have any axe to grind. They're committed to the city, and we're satisfied they could do a good job. Well, anyway, the election is Tuesday. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. We won't have the results by then, but hopefully you'll get out and